Tera Vanachare Yamuna Tera Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihare Kopejana Valabha Girivardhare Kopejana Valabha Girivardhare Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Shri Radhe. Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaura Haribol, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribol. Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Go Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading today from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 9, entitled Lord Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy. Today we are taking a look at text number 40. Ya etena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhajet tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Ya etena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhajet tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Yaitena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhaje tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Yaitena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhaje tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Yaitena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhaje tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Mataji. Yaitena pumanityam stutva stotrena mam bhajet tasyashu samprasideyam sarvakama vareshvara. Ya, anyone who etena, by this, puman, human being, nityam, regularly, stotva, praying, stotrena, by the verses, mam, me, bhajed, may worship, tasya, his, ashu, very soon. Samprasideyam, I shall fulfill. Sarva, all. Kama, desires. Varaishvara, the Lord of all benediction. Purport. The prayers offered by Brahma cannot be chanted by anyone who desires to fulfill his own sense gratification. Such prayers can be selected only by a person who wants to satisfy the Lord in his service. The Lord certainly fulfills all desires in regards to transcendental loving service, but he cannot fulfill the whims of non-devotees, even when such casual devotees offer him the best of prayers. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagna Ragnatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahakana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Ya etena pamanityam studva stotrenam ham bhajet tasyasu samprasidayam sarvakama varishvara. Any human being who prays like Brahma and who thus worships me shall very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all his desires, for I am the Lord of all benediction. So we are coming now to an end to Lord Brahma's prayers, in which we hear Lord Vishnu's response. So that is an amazing part of Vedic literature, that a large portion of the Bhagavatam is composed of the prayers of the great devotees. And these prayers are very important because these prayers, they give us an insight. They give us an insight into the desires of the devotees. Because it is really in the devotees' prayers that you can hear a little bit about what is really happening inside of them. So we saw once that once the devotees were with Prabhupada, and afterwards they took darshan of the deities, and afterwards one of the devotees asked Prabhupada, "What did you pray for, Prabhupada?" Oh, interesting question. Prabhupada looked at him and Prabhupada said, "I simply pray, I was asking Krishna to protect me, that I don't fall down." And very interesting how Prabhupada instructed his disciple, basically. Now we know that Prabhupada's prayers are obviously much deeper than that, or obviously much more than just that. But it was interesting, this idea that to get a glimpse into the prayers of a devotee, it's actually a very intimate, it's something very intimate, because it's the most intimate part of our experience with Krishna, is what the desires are that we cultivate within our hearts. So in these prayers of Lord Brahma, we got an insight into Lord Brahma's his deep desires and the way in which he approaches Krishna, which is important because to become Lord Brahma is not a simple thing. There's a great position of great responsibility. And Lord Brahma is considered to be the most pious living entity in this universe. What he must have performed to be able to become Lord Brahma, we cannot imagine. How many pious acts and how pure he must be, to be able to be entrusted with the ability to design and create the universe. So therefore his prayers are very important because we get an insight into a person that is greatly elevated, extremely pious. And we see what is his desire, how he approaches his service. Now, the one thing that certainly came out in Lord Brahma's prayers is, just as this example that we saw with Srila Prabhupada, see that Lord Brahma also prayed for the Lord's protection. So very interesting, even though he was so pious, the way in which one attains piety and the way in which one maintains a sense of piety is by always asking for the Lord's protection. Because even Lord Brahma, even though he was so powerful, it's the most amazing thing how he is such a powerful living entity, but then we read in his prayers that he is just praying to Krishna for his protection, because he understands that at any moment he can be pulled down, pulled down into the lower modes of nature. And specifically because he was busy with a passionate activity, the passionate activity of creating material energy, which is by nature something very dangerous. If you get into creative activity, it's very easy to be carried away. We see that a lot of the activities that we do here at the temple is very regulated activities. Deity worship, for example, it's very regulated. It happens in a very specific way. It happens in a very specific time. It's like it's very regulated, and it's very healthy then for us. Regulated devotional activity like that really helps, calms us down. But then we see creative activity is also sometimes there when we start creating for a festival, or maybe we start writing a play, or we do some dance. So these things are all creative, and it's also very healthy for us because it's very exciting. But we see that creative activity can very much sometimes go, has to stay under control. If you look at people that are very creative, unless you are very pious, that passionate activity can also render great harm. If we look at the world now, because people are not pious, if you look at the creative people in the world, they're very sinful, actually very degraded. Look at artists, musicians, people who are busy with this very creative, passionate activity, because they are not protected by the Lord, because they are not performing these activities with a desire to serve the Lord. That vicious mode of passion, it actually destroys their life, because you cannot regulate yourself anymore. This passionate desire just increases, and then everything else in your life becomes chaotic, and then you have to do so many other things to balance it out. So if we see people, great whatever, rock musicians or artists or painters, they go through these frenzies and they do all this creative work, and then they have to drink something or take some drugs so that they can calm down. So the devotee, he doesn't have to do that, because we see Lord Brahma, no one can, his creative activity, no one can compare to that. Creating the universe, you can't imagine. Designing the species, like we see now, people design cars or all these complicated machines, and it takes so much energy. But there's no technology. The highest form of technology is the human body. There's nothing, it's like the most amazing sense of engineering. So if you think about how all the organs come together, how they're positioned, how they work together to produce, to clean your blood, to produce whatever it is, to have all your sensory experiences, the eyes, the ears, the design that goes into that. It's the highest form of technology. And all other technology is actually just trying to recreate that. How the body, for example, can heal itself. What an amazing thing. They're still trying to understand how it works, because they don't really understand it. It goes beyond their intelligence. How the body can grow, how the body can go from something that's this small and just start growing into something bigger. So all technology is just trying to recreate the body. It's just trying to understand something about it and trying to recreate it. But Lord Brahma was the individual who engineered that, who designed that. So his creative activities is something that we cannot imagine. What to speak of the planets? The one who designs how all the planets are situated, how all the planets are revolving around various things, how all the planets are kept in air. Now, obviously, this is done by the Lord's empowerment, but it is Lord Brahma. He was the individual who organized these things. But we see he was protected because the motivation behind his activities was to serve Krishna's purpose, to serve Krishna's mission. And that's what he prayed here also at the end. He says he prayed for two things. He prayed for the Lord's protection, and he prayed for the Lord's empowerment, that his desires can always stay connected with the Lord's desire. And then we see here when Lord Vishnu answers, when Lord Vishnu responds to his prayers, that Lord Vishnu is responding and explaining to him how glorious your prayers is. And he tells him that because your mind is always fixed on me, even though you will be engaged in generating various progeny, the vicious mode of passion will never encroach upon you. So Lord Vishnu explains that yes, even though you will now be engaged in this passionate creative activity, because your mind is fixed upon me, you will be protected. Even though all this passionate activity, it won't disrupt your life. Everything will be okay. So, and we see here that Prabhupada also makes the point here in this purport that Lord Vishnu says that any person who prays like Lord Brahma, all his desires will be fulfilled. And that's something that people have to understand, because Prabhupada points out here, the reason why all Brahma's desires will be fulfilled is because the only desires that Lord Brahma had was the desire to serve Krishna. So that is the thing. People are thinking, how can I fulfill all my desires? Well, there's two steps to fulfill all your desires. The first is you have to get rid of all those desires that cannot be fulfilled. Prabhupada gives an interesting definition of lust. And he says, what is lust? He says, lust is desire that is impossible to fulfill. If you have a desire, if you have a dream for something, a desire for something, but that desire will never actually be fulfilled, and that is lust. So we see sex, food, money. If you are thinking that you're going to get satisfaction from pursuing any one of these like bodily or gross desires, you are actually in illusion, because there is no fulfillment there. You cannot get satisfied purely by getting more money. We see people have billions of dollars, but they are not satisfied. They want more. We see how many people they eat so much fast food and trash food, but they will just continue to do that because it's when the senses become addicted to these lower things, it can never be fulfilled. So there's no satisfaction involved in pursuing bodily desires. So therefore, Prabhupada points out here that it is only when one's desires becomes directed to Krishna's service, those desires will be fulfilled. Krishna will help you fulfill those desires. And that's what we see. It might not necessarily happen overnight. We see that in the life of Srila Prabhupada. We see Prabhupada's amazing thing, one of Prabhupada's amazing qualities was, if you're reading the Lilamrita, if you're reading the early stages of Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada was just a very average devotee. In the early days, he was not someone special. He was just someone who used to come to the temple a little bit. He gave some donations. He would, but he wasn't a brahmachari. He never stayed in the temple. He never gave big donations. It's not like someone who was giving lots of money to the temple. He was not in any kind of big management position. He was just Mr. Day. And then later, Abai Babu, who would come to the temple and do some service, and he was a good Mridanga player, that's true, and his classes were sometimes very nice. But for that, he was just looked normal. So it was actually quite a shock later when Prabhupada turned out to be the person that would fulfill Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's desire. Many people were actually shocked. There were also some of Prabhupada's godbrothers who would say that, oh, the reason why Prabhupada is successful is because Prabhupada is actually very good with business. It's because he's a good businessman. So therefore he was able to go to America and to do some business so he can make some good money. And therefore that's why he's successful. So Prabhupada, that is a very short-sighted way to look at it. If we really look at Prabhupada's own understanding of why it is that this great miracle happened to him, why it is that he was able to achieve so much success in fulfilling the desires of his spiritual master, is because of Prabhupada's exclusive focus. That was Prabhupada's thing. Prabhupada said, it is because I had 100% faith in the execution of this one desire. And he was not trying to do many different things. He was trying to do only this one thing, which is this one order that he received from his spiritual master. That is why Prabhupada achieved such great success. Because there was one desire that just dominated his life completely, which is this desire of his spiritual master. So that is really what we are seeing. That's what we're seeing also with Lord Brahma, with these wonderful great devotees. The reason why they can achieve so many wonderful things is because they have one desire, They have one desire that becomes the main thing in their life. Now, obviously, they do many things around it. We see in Prabhupada's life, it's not that Prabhupada was a boring person or a fanatic person. Prabhupada did so many things. He tried so many different ways to get to America. He was willing, we see at a certain point, he was trying to go through Japan when he got the invitation for some religious conference that was happening in Japan. So then Prabhupada said, okay, let me see if I can go to Japan. And then later he was trying this thing, and then he was trying that thing. And then when he came to America, then we see immediately he had so many ideas. He first saw a building. He saw he would start looking at buildings in Manhattan, and then he tried to get Padampiat Singh to see if he can buy him a building. So Prabhupada was trying many different things. It's not that he was narrow-minded. It's not that he was like just thinking I should do this one thing. Prabhupada was trying many different avenues, exploring many different ways. But behind it all was just one single desire, which is the desire to execute the missions of his spiritual master. So that is very amazing how this desire, it's very simple and it's very focused, but it's not stereotypical, as Prabhupada would say. Prabhupada would say devotional service is never stereotypical. It's never just one thing. One has to be willing to see how Krishna's desire can manifest in many different ways. But it is that ceaseless desire to try to execute that one order of his spiritual master. Therefore, the devotee, he is always very careful in judging all the various things that he does in the relationship with his ultimate desire. The devotee is always playing things off. Like we see another reason why Prabhupada would say why he was successful is because he was willing to adjust certain principles. Prabhupada was able to adjust. He writes in his purport one of his purports in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada writes that one cannot necessarily expect that devotional service will look exactly the same in India as it will look in the West. And he writes this whole purport how the Acharya, he has to be willing to make some adjustments in order to fulfill this desire. Because, like for example, Prabhupada allowed ladies to live in the temple, which is very revolutionary. In India, that was generally not the case. But why did Prabhupada do it? Because in that time, you had so many ladies whose parents were not supportive of Krishna consciousness. And therefore, the only way they could practice Krishna consciousness is if they got sheltered in the temple. So Prabhupada made that adjustment. And so many other things Prabhupada adjusted in order to make his mission possible. So therefore, Prabhupada said devotional service is not stereotypical. One always has to be willing to see what needs to be done. One has to also be very careful and very pure, because if one adjusts the wrong things, then that can lead to disaster. But the point we are trying to make is that devotional service is not stereotypical, and that one should be always very sincere in staying connected to the spiritual master's desire, but always be open to see what opportunities Krishna gives us. Now, we can also look at the other side of this coin. Like we see here that the pure devotees, his desire is blessed because he gives up. He only focuses on the desire of Krishna, and therefore all his desires become fulfilled. But the other side is also there, where we see in the 4th canto of the Bhagavatam, when Maharaj Prithu, he had made a commitment, a vow, to try to fulfill 100 horse sacrifices. And as he performed his 99th sacrifice, as he was starting to perform the 100th sacrifice, we see that Lord Indra came and disrupted his sacrifice. He stole the sacrificial horse repeatedly, and he would dress himself in various, dress himself as a pseudo sannyasi or a pseudo renunciate in order to get protection. And more than once they tried to kill him, but then they realized it's Lord Indra, and then they released him. So at that point, then Lord Prithu was instructed by Lord Vishnu after he had, or actually I think it was Narada Muni, one of the sages, appeared to him and spoke to him and then told him that if a desire has been thwarted, has been foiled by destiny, if one of your plans by destiny is not going to work out, and if you continue to try to fulfill that desire, then you enter into the darkest regions of ignorance. So when we have a material desire, if a material desire is there and you are desiring something that is impossible to fulfill, then you will enter into very deep regions of ignorance. Why is that? Krishna explains that the reason why lust drives people mad is because lust that is unfulfilled, if you have a strong desire and the desire is frustrated, it leads to anger. Leads to anger, bitterness, resentment, envy. These are all dark emotions, very dark experiences of the heart that comes when one experiences the frustration and disappointment of not having one's material desires fulfilled. And that bitterness, that anger, it actually poisons the heart. It poisons the heart and it leads to deeper and deeper ignorance. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita how that anger, it leads to the bewilderment of memory. And then once the memory is bewildered, then we can do the most crazy things. We do crazy things when we are angry. So anger is very dangerous, but anger is rooted in desire that is not fulfilled, in frustrated desire. So we see now in the modern world, many people have desires that are actually just impossible to fulfill. So many desires that exist that just are not possible to fulfill. One example, so we can see, for example, any case, so many things are there. We don't have the people's crazy desires that are there in the modern world. We all know what people desire, and then people can become very angry when their desires are not fulfilled. So that is what we call the culture of nescience. And as we see people that are increasingly frustrated and bitter and angry because their desires are not fulfilled, that is a very dangerous situation that causes the great degradation of the mind, and that leads to further and further craziness, further and further madness, as people then seek to fulfill unfulfillable desires. So for the devotee also, one has to be careful, because we are not pure devotees, or maybe some of us are, I'm not sure. I see many exalted Vaishnavas here, it could be. But for many of us who are not pure, it means that we hold two desires in our heart at the same time. We hold some of Krishna's desire. We are here because we are interested in fulfilling Krishna's desire. Otherwise, there would be no reason for us to sit here and do what we are doing. And that is glorious. That is our great good fortune, that we have somehow developed a desire to serve Krishna. But at the same time, we are still also very much connected to matter, very much connected to the material energy, and to a certain extent still invested in certain material things that we want. And for the sadhaka, for the practicing devotee, this always creates a certain kind of uncomfortability, these two things. It's always there. And the devotee is always on guard. He is always trying to be aware of what should be adjusted. So sometimes Krishna will make it clear to us. Sometimes Krishna allows us what we need to stay healthy and happy and sane. That is also there. Krishna does make facilities to us, and he gives us certain room to do what we need to do. But then sometimes a time comes where Krishna says, now it is time. Now it's time to move forward. Now it's time. I've come now. I want this now. For a long time, I've allowed you to have this, but now I've come and I'm going to come and take it. And at that point, we sometimes can engage in a little bit of a battle with Krishna when we try to hold on, and there's like a little bit of a tug of war. But at a certain point, we realize that it is better to actually just let it go. So the devotee has to be sensitive to that when that time comes, and we will see that whenever we experience great frustration, disappointment, and bitterness and anger in our lives, it is at that point that the devotee really has to go sit and look, where is this coming from? Where is this anger and this disappointment coming from, this frustration? Because this frustration is very unhealthy for devotional service. It is a very unhealthy thing, because Krishna clearly explains that the most healthy state of mind, the best state of mind one can be in, the state of mind that is the most conducive for our devotional service, is when we are satisfied When you can be relatively satisfied with your life and how it is, that is the position in which it is the most easiest to execute devotional service, the most easiest to be open to Krishna's desire, and also the state of mind when the execution of the process of devotional service will give us the most happiness, because we're just satisfied, we're happy. Then to hear and to chant is not a struggle. But frustration, as frustration creeps into our life, this frustration, it disturbs the mind immensely. And it will make it very difficult when we are frustrated or resentful or all these, that various kinds of experiences. That makes it very, very difficult to execute the process of devotional service. So one has to really look and say, where is this coming from? What is this? Sometimes it might mean a radical change in our life. Sometimes we're wrongly situated. We're in the wrong place, trying to do the wrong thing. Maybe in the wrong ashram, maybe in the wrong place. Therefore, one has to be careful to adjust. But sometimes, more often than not, the adjustment that has to be made is an internal adjustment. An internal adjustment where one has to just adjust your expectations, the expectations that you have of life. You have to adjust what it is that you are demanding from Krishna within your heart. Because more often than not, externally, things are okay. The situation Krishna has given us is, so often than not, it's okay. But it is due to this, our expectations that we have that come into conflict with the situation. So in this way, the devotee always has to be very careful to look at what do I need to do to be satisfied with my situation, satisfied with what Krishna has given me, and satisfied with the service that I have. Because devotional service, Krishna will give us a service, but, and this is a very important thing to understand, that the results of that service, it depends on how much we are able to invest in it. How much are you willing to invest your heart in the service that has been given to you? It is not just that the service will automatically purifies us, but it depends on us to really take it seriously, to invest ourselves into it. If we look, for example, at something like the 24-hour kirtan in Vrindavan, then you see it's a very simple service. But why is it such a powerful thing? It's because you have all these people that are so invested in it. There are people that are so serious about it. They are really willing, to go there at 1 o'clock in the morning to 4 o'clock in the morning and chant there. So any service, a service is like, it's one of those things that the more if a devotee puts his heart into that service, then the service becomes like a jewel and it becomes this most amazing thing, even though it's very simple. And the same thing is there. If there's a service, but no devotee's heart is invested into it, you will see it will just stay floppy. It will just stay this little, like, not so nice, and it's no real enthusiasm there. So all of us, to a certain extent, we get given some service, but it does depend on us really to decide how much am I going to invest myself in the service, how much will I put my heart into the service, and that is our real offering to Krishna. And that's when we look at someone like Srila Prabhupada. We saw that even though Prabhupada had such a simple instruction, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta just gave it to him, and it's not like he gave him a big talk. He just asked him the first time he met him, you please try to spread Krishna consciousness in the English-speaking world. But we saw that because Prabhupada invested himself so seriously, so fully into this one desire, we saw the amazing results that come from that. So that is what we have to understand, that sometimes in the initial stages of devotional service, we think that the problem I have is I have the wrong service. We think my problem is I have the wrong service. And if I would just get the right service, then somehow or other, everything will be wonderful. Then I will be enthusiastic, and then I will be able to do so many wonderful things. But the problem is now I have the wrong service. And therefore, I have all these difficulties, and therefore I'm not really happy in my devotional service. But if we read Prabhupada's letters, we see that Prabhupada many, many times. There's this one very famous letter, actually, that Prabhupada wrote to Jayapataka Maharaj. Very wonderful letter. Where Jayapataka Maharaj, he wrote to Prabhupada, telling Prabhupada, he was asking Prabhupada that he is so happy, and he is so so ecstatic in his service in Mayapur. And he was asking Prabhupada, maybe is he becoming too attached to Mayapur? Maybe it's not healthy. He was hearing how devotees are being. They were thinking, if I'm so attached to this place, maybe it's not good for my spiritual life. Maybe I should be a little less detached, little detached. So Prabhupada wrote them his letter, and Prabhupada said, no. He says, this attachment you are feeling for Mayapur Dham, for your service, this is actually very glorious. And this attachment is very wonderful. And this attachment is just to be encouraged. If you can become attached to the service that your spiritual master has given you, that is your great protection. And Prabhupada said, that is actually the trick in spiritual life. The trick in spiritual life is to think that whatever I am doing at any moment for Krishna, that is my service. Let me just do this is what I'm doing. Let me do this with my full attention. Let me just do this with my full attention. And then surely Krishna's blessings will be upon me. And Prabhupada said that is the secret in Krishna consciousness. That if we can be in this spirit of just seeing whatever we are doing in that connection and understanding that really I'm doing this for Krishna, and we do it with full enthusiasm and with full attention, it is at that point that we make contact with Krishna consciousness. And we really have that experience that ultimately reveals Krishna within our lives. And that spirit is up to us. The spiritual master can give us a service. The spiritual master can give us transcendental knowledge. The spiritual master can be available to us and sometimes come and give classes and do so many things to try and inspire us. But it is ultimately the responsibility of the disciple to choose to take up this service in a spirit of enthusiasm and to see it, that this now I will do for Krishna's pleasure. Only you can make that decision to approach your service in this way. And as we say, one can bring a horse to the water, but you cannot force it to drink. So that is what we have to understand, that switch, one could say, that willingness to see the service in this capacity, that depends on you. That only depends on you. You have to make that decision if you're willing to see the service in this capacity. And if you are not, to the extent that you are not, to that extent, devotional service will be a struggle, and frustration will creep into our spiritual lives. But it's always nice here, therefore, to look at the Bhagavatam, to look at pure devotees, and to see here what a glorious boon by Lord Vishnu. He was so impressed by Lord Brahma's prayers, saying that any person who prays like this, any person who prays for service like this, for protection in their service and for empowerment in their service, this person shall very soon be blessed with the fulfillment of all their desires. Lord Vishnu was greatly impressed, and it is inspiring for us to look at these devotees, and then we all try in our own life to do the best that we can to live up to their examples. So let us hear if there are any questions, any comments. Yes, Mahagopika Mataji. Yes. 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 Yeah. Yes, that is the wonderful vision of the devotee. Any other questions, comments? Jimmy. Yeah. Yeah. It's your glory, Jimmy. It's your enthusiastic spirit that you are contributing. Bhakta Jimmy Prabhu Ki. Jai. Any other comments or questions? Well, then I think we can end a little early here. A lot of packing of cookies and all kinds of services happening in preparation for Chapitaka Maharaj's class today. And we can see then, as we look at Jayapataka Maharaj, we have the opportunity to see him today. That is really a wonderful reflection that we can have, that Maharaj's glories and Maharaj's amazing enthusiasm and dedication to devotional service. Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki, Shrimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Go Premanande. Yes, definitely. Mirage is extremely creative. Yes. Jai Pataka Swami Maharaj ki. Jai.